was pregnant with my first child. And then once I had him, I said, you know what, I think I'm going to just kind of leave the corporate world for a while and do the mom thing and raise him from home. My husband at the time was traveling a lot. He's in medical device sales, and it just made sense for our family at the time for me to take a step back. I'm like, I can always go back to work, but I'm not going to get this type, time back. So that was my decision. I had left corporate America in 2007, had my second child in 2011. And then here we go, a couple years later, starting to get the itch to, make my own income again and find an identity.
So I'm going to ask you though, before we get to your new business and your new entrepreneurship that you started, tell me about being home with the kids and being a full-time mom and how that was in the changing of the, being very, I won't even say like career focused, but when you're working for commission and bonuses and trips and things, you're very driven, which is so different from kind of, I always call it on tapping the brakes a little bit when you shift to being a mom, or whether it's full-time home with the kids or full-time working and still being a mom. It just changes everything. So
it does. It really does.
So staying home, were there shocks? I mean, were you surprised by, the amount, I always thought the amount of work or the amount of energy? I think we've talked about this. I was a full-time attorney and a mom, and then I was a part-time attorney and a mom of 3, and then I was a full-time stay-at-home mom with 4, and then I kind of went back to work with 4 part-time, and then back to work full-time. So I've like run the gamut of it and really realize how complicated it can be with kids. So, when you stayed home with the kids, was there any shock? Was there any, oh my goodness, I need to go back to work? I know for me, there was a point where I said, I need to go back to work. I love being a mom, but I need to go back to work.
I know. And I can understand that because listen, I think being a full-time mom too is hard, and it is a job. I mean, there are times where, and it can be a thankless job. I wouldn't trade it for the world. Here's what happened. I feel initially, I absolutely loved it. And what I would say to myself was, wow, I don't know how women have full-time jobs with kids at home, because I'm like, there were days where you don't sleep. And I'm like, I couldn't imagine having to go to an office job right now. I'm exhausted. So I commend, women that do that, because I think it's very hard. As far as a shock, I didn't feel that initially. No, I enjoyed every moment. I really did. I was happy I made that decision. I did not miss working in the corporate world right away. It didn't happen until, later on. Once I got over that hump, and I'm like, all right, my kids are good. But listen, I loved volunteering for their schools and being there for all their sports. And I mean, that's what my mother had done for me. And I almost felt like I was, kind of carrying on her legacy. It was one of my favorite memories of my mom. She was always there after school. She always made homemade chicken soup or had something waiting for us. And I find myself doing the same thing. She'd ring that cowbell at every single tennis match and track meet we had. And it made me so happy as a child. And I said, I'd want to give that to my kids. So hopefully they have those memories. Not that you can't do that if you're working, obviously. People do when they work. But for me, I don't know. I just felt like it was the right decision for me and our family. Because then, otherwise I'd be having to have other people come in and help me out with the kids if I was working full time. So, it's a give and take, but I didn't regret my decision. But then as my oldest was 10, I started to feel like this heavy weight on my shoulders. Like, okay, I'm smart and I don't feel like I'm using my brain anymore. like I feel like it's going to mush. I feel like I'm just known as the mom who makes good mac and cheese and does the laundry and cleans. And I'm like, I can't do that. Like, I got to the point where like, I can't do this anymore.
Right.
And like, I don't want to do this anymore. But I love, like, is that terrible to say?
No, you know what? I think there was a time when I treated being home with the kids and with my kids as like a full-time job. And so I was the class mom for a little bit, and, Halloween would come and I make cupcakes with spider webs on it. And, and I was teaching at Rowan University at the time, but I still, when my youngest was going to school, I felt the same way, Kim. I felt like I needed more than just to be that full-time mom at every event and every classroom event. And I loved my kids at every age, and I loved being that mom, but I needed to go back to work. And, in some ways, I think my kids got the best of both worlds. When they were little, they got me a lot in elementary school. And then, in high school, sometimes they'd come home and they'd say, there's a class party where we all have to bring in stuff. And my kids learned pretty early on, from the time that I went back to work full time. I was like, I'm the napkin mom. I'm not the cupcake mom who's decorating with spider webs and spiders anymore. I'm the napkin mom or the plate mom. And I'm okay being that mom.